I was there. I want you to understand that first before I tell you anything else. I was in the room, not watching a recording, not reading some cleaned-up report years later. I stood 11 paces from the humans when they got up and left, and I felt the whole chamber go cold around me, and I have never been able to unfeel it since. My name is Vusa. I am Selith. We are a small people in size and in number, and we are good at two things: staying quiet and listening. That is why they made me an interpreter. Nobody fears a Selith. Nobody bothers to lie carefully in front of one. You learn a great deal about the galaxy when everyone forgets you have ears. So let me tell you what I learned that day. Let me tell you about the day the most powerful beings in the known galaxy made one small, careless mistake, and how fast the universe punished them for it. It still wakes me sometimes, the sound the doors made. The station was called the Spindle. If you have never seen it, picture a needle as long as a small moon, hanging in empty space with nothing around it for half a light year. No planet, no star close enough to warm it. The Conquered built it that way on purpose, far from everything, so that when the great species came to talk, they would owe nothing to the ground they stood on. Neutral. That was the idea. Neutral and cold and very, very old. I had worked there 4 cycles by then. Long enough to stop noticing how beautiful it was, which is its own kind of sad. The Hall of Concord sat at the center of the needle. A round chamber, tiered like the inside of a shell, ringed with seats for the member species. Above us, the dome was clear, and through it you could see the dark and the slow turning of the stars, and it was meant to remind everyone in that room how small a single world was against all of that. It did not remind the Conquered of anything. The Conquered had stopped feeling small a very long time ago. The morning of the talks, the hall was full. I remember the smell first. You always smell a full chamber before you see it. The dry musk of the Dranic, who sat highest because they always sat highest. The wet leaf scent of the Illand clerks with their endless ledgers. The Kavan traders, who smelled of metal and money and something sweet they rubbed into their skin. The AI in their sealed standing pods, clicking softly to one another in a language even I could not read. And the noise, translators humming, robes shifting, the little hiss of the air recyclers which never quite kept up when the hall was packed. I was assigned to the human delegation, junior post. Nobody wanted it. You have to understand how the galaxy saw humans then, not as enemies. That would have been almost respectful. They saw humans as a problem that had not finished being small yet. A young species. Loud, the older races said. Sentimental. Always grieving things, always making art about how sad it was that things end. The Dranic had a word for them that the polite translators rendered as the weepers. I will not tell you what it actually meant. Humans had been in the wider galaxy for less than 3 of our generations. They had a few colonies, a modest fleet, good engineers. Everyone admitted that, grudgingly, the way you admit a child is good at drawing. But nobody thought of them as a power. That is why the talks were happening at all. You see, the Conquered had not invited humanity to the Spindle as an equal. I want to be honest about this, because everyone afterward pretended otherwise. The talks were not a welcome. They were a sorting. The official word was integration. Humanity would be brought under Conquered protection. In exchange, humanity would place its fleet under Conquered command, hand over its industrial output to Conquered allocation, and accept observer status. Not a vote, not a seat, just a chair near the door where they could watch their betters decide their future. For their own good. That was the phrase the Dranic kept using, for your own good. Because there was a war. I should tell you about the war, or none of the rest will land the way it landed on us. The Conquered was losing. They did not say this out loud. Great powers never say the true thing out loud. They say a smaller, more comfortable thing and dare you to call it a lie. So the Conquered said there was an ongoing security situation in the outer reach. What they meant was that something was coming in from the dark between the arms of the galaxy, and it was eating them. We called it the Seer. I've heard humans since ask me what the seer looked like, and I never have a good answer because the seer did not really look like anything. They were not a face. They were not even ships, not the way you mean ships. They came as a gray advance, a tide of cold machines and the things that rode inside them, and they did not negotiate, and they did not stop, and they did not leave survivors who could describe them clearly afterward. A system would go quiet. Then the system next to it would go quiet. Then you would realize the quiet was moving toward you at a steady, patient speed, and that it had been moving for longer than anyone admitted. The conquered had fought the seer for 40 cycles, 40 cycles of falling back, 40 cycles of strategic consolidation, which is what you call a retreat when you are too proud to call it a retreat. World after world after world. The Dranic had lost 2 of their own colonies in the last decade and had told no one for almost a year. That was the fear under everything in that hall. You could smell it under the musk and the sweet oil and the wet leaves. Fear. Old, deep, well-hidden fear. And here was humanity, a young, fertile, industrious little species, with shipyards that worked fast and people who bred quick and died without much fuss. To the conquered, humans were not a partner. They were a resource that had not been claimed yet. Fresh hulls, fresh hands, fresh bodies to put between the conquered and the gray tide while the great species figured out what to do. That was the real shape of the talks. Strip it of the soft words and that is what it was. Come here, little ones. Give us your ships and your factories and your young. We will keep you safe. And the humans, everyone assumed, would say yes. Of course they would say yes. What choice did a small, frightened species have with the seer coming but to crawl under the wing of the strong? The human delegation arrived late. Not very late, a few minutes, but in that hall where the Dranic measured insult in heartbeats, a few minutes was a sentence spoken before a word was said. The High Arbiter let the silence stretch so everyone would notice. I noticed. I noticed I was sweating, and I am not built to sweat. Then the doors opened and they came in, and I will tell you, they were not what I expected. There were only 4 of them. 4. The Dranic had brought 60. The Illand had brought a whole tower of clerks, and humanity sent 4 people across the dark to the center of the galaxy to be told their future, and they walked in like 4 was enough. The one in front was a woman, their lead. Her name was Essie Boteng, and the moment I saw her I revised every assumption I had carried into that room, because she did not move like a frightened thing. She was not large. By Dranic standards she was nothing. They towered, all of them, and she came up barely to a Dranic elbow. Dark skin, gray threaded into her hair, a plain dark coat with no rank marks, no jewels, no projected sigils. The other delegations wore their power. She wore a coat. That was it. She walked into the most powerful room in the galaxy, and she was not in a hurry, and she was not afraid, and she looked up at the tears of the great species with an expression I had no translation for at the time. I have one now. I would call it patience. The patience of someone who already knows how a story ends and is only waiting for the others to catch up. Behind her came 3 more. A broad, quiet man they called Rays, who said nothing the entire first session and watched the exits the way a soldier watches exits. An older man with ink-stained hands who kept a small device in his palm and never looked at it. And a young one, very young, who looked terrified and tried hard not to show it and mostly failed. I liked the young one immediately. He, at least, understood where he was. They took their seats, the low seats near the door, the observer chairs. Essie Boteng sat in the observer chair like it was a throne she had chosen. The talks began. The High Arbiter of that session was Soren Drak. I had interpreted for Soren Drak before. I did not like him. I am not supposed to have opinions. An interpreter is a window, not a voice. But I had opinions about Soren Drak, and the chief one was that he had never in his long life been told no by anyone who survived saying it. He was magnificent, I will give him that. Dranic are built like fortified towers, all dense muscle and chitin plating, and Sarandrak was old enough that his plates had gone the deep red black of dried blood, which among his people meant authority. When he stood, the hall quieted on its own. When he spoke, the dome seemed to lean in to listen. He welcomed humanity, that is the word he used, welcomed. He spoke for a long time. He spoke of the conquered's generosity, of the great burden of protection the older species carried, of how rare it was for a young people to be offered shelter under such wings. He spoke of the seer, briefly, as a regrettable pressure on the frontier, as though it were weather. He never once said losing. He never once said afraid. And then he laid out the terms. The human fleet would be redesignated as a conquered auxiliary, under Dranic operational command. Human industrial worlds would shift to conquered production quotas, set by the Iland. Human colonies in the contested reach, and there were 3, right in the path of the gray tide, would be evacuated and seeded, their populations resettled for their safety, to camps the conquered would administer. In exchange, humanity would receive conquered protection, an observer status, and the deep honor of being counted among the protected peoples. He said honor with a straight face. I translated it. The word sat in my mouth like a stone. When he finished, he looked down at the small woman in the plain coat, and he did the thing the powerful always do. He did not ask. He waited. He waited the way you wait for a door to close on its own, certain of the outcome, already thinking about the next thing. And Essie Boteng waited too. She let the silence go long, longer than was polite, longer than was comfortable. I watched the Dranic ring shift, the small, irritated ripple of beings unused to waiting, and still she said nothing, and I realized slowly, the way you realize the floor is tilting, that she was doing to him exactly what he had done to her at the doors. She was making him feel the seconds. Then she stood. A small woman in a plain coat stood up in the lowest seat in the Hall of Concord, and somehow every eye in that chamber went to her. "Thank you, High Arbiter," she said. "Before I respond, I want to make sure I understood you correctly. Will you allow me a few questions?" Her voice was even, pleasant almost. I rendered it as carefully as I could. The Dranic value precision in speech, and I did not want a single shade lost. Sarandrak made the gesture that meant proceed, with the lazy magnanimity of a being granting a small thing. "You spoke of protection," she said. "I want to understand the protection. In the last 40 cycles, how many systems has the conquered successfully defended against the seer? Not held temporarily, defended, held and still held today." The hall went very still. It was a rude question. Not in words it was perfectly polite. But everyone in that room knew the answer, and everyone in that room had spent 40 cycles agreeing never to say it. Sarandrak's plates shifted. "War is fluid," he said. "Strategic consolidation is not defeat." "That isn't a number," she said. "There are factors." "It isn't a number, High Arbiter," still pleasant, still even. "I'll help you. The answer by your own Iland records, which my delegation has read, all of them, they're very thorough. The answer is none. In 40 cycles, the conquered has not held a single contested system against the seer. Not one. Every world the gray tide has reached, the gray tide has taken. You have never stopped them. You have only ever moved out of their way." I heard the Iland ledger keepers make a sound I had never heard them make, a kind of dry rattle, the sound of bureaucrats hearing their own numbers used as a weapon. "You misrepresent," Sarandrak began, and his voice had dropped into the lower registers, the warning tones. "I'm reading your figures back to you," she said. "If they misrepresent something, the error is yours, not mine." And then she did something I will never forget. She turned, slightly, away from the High Arbiter. She turned to the whole hall, to all the tiers, all the great species, all the powers of the galaxy ringed above her in their robes and their armor and their fear. And she spoke to all of them. "You called these talks integration," she said. "Let me tell you what they actually are, because I think some of you in this room genuinely don't know, and you deserve to. You are losing a war you cannot win the way you are fighting it. You have been losing it for 40 cycles. You are out of worlds to trade for time, and you are out of time to trade them for. And so, you looked around the galaxy for someone young enough and frightened enough, and small enough that you could take their ships and their factories and their children, put them between yourselves and the thing that is coming, and call it protection. You did not invite us here to make us safe. You invited us here to spend us. The hall erupted. Not all at once. The Dranic ring went rigid first, a wall of red-black fury. Then the Coven traders started up, loud, offended, calculating. The AI clicked madly in their pods. Somewhere a Illand voice was shouting about decorum, about the dignity of the conquered, about the unforgivable insolence of a client species. Sarandrak rose to his full, terrible height. When a Dranic of his age stands fully, the chitin plates flare, and it is meant to end arguments by sheer mass. The hall lighting through his shadow across half the chamber, across her. She stood in his shadow and did not move. "You forget where you are," he said, and the translators barely kept up with the speed of his rage. "You forget what you are, a small people, a young people, a people with nowhere to go and nothing to bargain with. You will accept the terms of the conquered because you have no other choice, and you will be grateful because the alternative is to face the seer alone, and you cannot. You have seen what we cannot stop. You think you will stop it. You." He leaned down toward her. The whole chamber held its breath. "You will sign," he said, "or you will burn. Those are the only two paths a creature as small as you has ever had." And I waited with everyone else for the small woman in the plain coat to break, because that was the script. That was how it always went. The great species pushed, and the small species bent, and afterward everyone called it diplomacy. She did not bend. She looked up at the towering, ancient, furious creature throwing its shadow across her, and she was quiet for a moment. And then she said something so simply, so plainly, that it took a heartbeat for the horror of it to spread through the room. "You're right that those used to be the only two paths," she said. "Sign or burn. That's been true for small peoples for a very long time. You've built your whole galaxy on it being true." She picked up her coat from the back of the chair, folded it once over her arm. "There's a third path now," she said. "We found it. And the terrible thing for you, High Arbiter, the thing you're going to spend the rest of your life regretting, is that you'll only understand what it is after we've walked out that door. And then it'll be too late to ask us nicely." She turned to her three. "We're done here," she said. "Let's go home." I have tried many times to describe what happened to the room in the next few seconds, and I always fall short, so I will just tell you what I saw. They got up. All four of them. The young one almost too fast, the soldier raised slow and easy, the old man with the ink-stained hands pocketing his little device, and Essie Boateng in the center, unhurried, her coat over her arm. And the most powerful chamber in the galaxy did not know what to do. That was the thing. That was the impossible thing. In that hall no one walked out. You could rage, you could threaten, you could weep, but you did not leave, because to leave was to say the conquered's word was not the last word, and that had not been true within living memory of any species in that room. For a moment nobody believed it was happening. Sarandrak certainly did not. He stood there in his terrible flared height with his shadow stretched across an empty chair, mid-threat, the air still ringing with "you will sign or you will burn," and the small people he had been threatening were simply walking away from him as though he were a closed door. I think I have thought about this a great deal. I think he expected them to stop, to turn at the threshold, to give him the chance to be merciful, which is what powerful beings want most, not obedience, but the chance to forgive you for almost disobeying. They did not turn. The great doors of the Hall of Concord are tall as a building, and they move slowly and they make a sound when they close. A deep, final, grinding sound, stone on ancient stone, that you feel in your back teeth. The humans walked through them, and the doors closed behind them. And that sound, that long, low, grinding finality, rolled through the silent hall, and I swear to you, I felt every great species in that room understand, in the same instant, that something had just gone very wrong, and that none of them yet knew what. The silence after the doors closed lasted maybe 4 seconds. It felt like a year. Then Sorendrak, still standing, still flared, made a sound low in his chest. Not a word, a sound. The sound a proud thing makes when it has been refused and cannot believe it. And he turned to the Illan ledger keepers and he said, "Bring them back." A clerk scrambled. "High Arbiter, they have not been dismissed, they cannot simply." "Bring them back," he said again. And there was something new under the fury now. Something I had never once heard in a Dranic voice in 4 cycles on that station. There was a threat of fear. Not the old, deep, hidden fear of the seer. A new fear. A small, sharp, immediate one. The fear of a being who has just done something and cannot yet see the bottom of it. Because here is what was happening in that hall, under the noise, in the seconds after the doors closed. The great species were beginning to do the thing they had refused to do for the entire session. They were beginning to think about her words. "A third path, we found it. You'll understand after we've walked out." The Kavan who calculate everything were calculating. I watched one of their senior traders go very still, the sweetol sheen on his skin gone dull, and I knew he was running the numbers backward. Why would a small, doomed, frightened species cross the galaxy to a room like this, sit in the lowest seat, and then refuse the only shelter on offer? You did not do that unless you were not, in fact, doomed. You did not do that unless you had something. And if you had something, and you had not told the conquered what it was, then the conquered had just driven you out the door before learning it. The Illand clerks were thinking it too. Their whole purpose was information, and they had just watched a delegation walk out holding the only piece of information that mattered, and they had let it leave. And Sorendrak was thinking the worst thought of all, the one that comes last to the proud, because their pride keeps the door shut against it as long as it can. He was thinking, what if she wasn't bluffing? I want to stop here and tell you something, because I was the interpreter, and I knew a thing that almost no one else in that hall knew yet. I had been with the human delegation since they docked. Part of my duty was to be present, to translate side conversations, to be the quiet Seleth in the corner that nobody thinks about. And in the days before the talks I had heard things, small things, a word here, half a sentence there. The old man with the ink-stained hands talking quietly to the young one about the Reach worlds. Raised the soldier saying once to no one in particular, they still don't know what happened at Tessamit. Tessamit. I knew that name. Everyone in the Conquered knew that name, the way you know the name of a wound. Tessamit was a system on the frontier, in the path of the Grey Tide, one of the 3 human colonies the Conquered had just demanded humanity evacuate and cede for their safety. The seer had reached Tessamit 8 cycles ago. And the Conquered had written it off, quietly the way they wrote off everything the tide touched. Another quiet system, another world gone gray. They had not even bothered to confirm the loss because the loss was a foregone conclusion. The seer reached you, you went silent, that was the pattern, 40 cycles of pattern, no exceptions. No one had checked Tessamit. Why would you check a grave? But I had heard the soldier say it. They still don't know what happened at Tessamit. And I had heard, the night before the talks, the old man with the ink-stained hands say one more thing, very softly, to Essie Boteng, when they thought the room was empty. He had said, "They're going to find out the hard way." And she had said, "That's the point." I did not understand it then. I understood it about 90 minutes later when the message reached the spindle. But that comes in the next part of the story, and I want to tell that part properly, because it is the part where the most powerful beings in the galaxy learned exactly what they had thrown away, and learned it in the worst possible order, at the worst possible speed, with the doors already closed. For now, hold on to this picture, hold on to the hall. 60 Dranik in their red-black armor, a tower of Iland clerks, the Kaven with their dulling sheen, the AI gone silent in their pods, and in the center on his feet, the High Arbiter Sorendrak, who had never been told no, standing in the long shadow of his own threat, ordering his clerks to chase 4 small people down a corridor and beg them, please, to come back into the room. And the 4 small people walking the other way, toward their ship, not hurrying. The grinding echo of the great doors, not yet faded from the air. I was 11 paces from where the humans had stood. I picked up the chair Essie Boteng had folded her coat over, the lowest chair, the observer chair, the one they'd put there to remind her of her place. I don't know why I picked it up. I think I just needed to touch something solid. And I remember thinking, very clearly, in the cold of that vast and frightened hall. They put her in the smallest seat in the galaxy, and she stood up in it and made the whole galaxy small. The clerks did not catch them. I want to start there because I think people imagine some great chase, 4 humans cornered in a corridor, dragged back into the light. It was nothing like that. The Iland sent 3 of their fastest runners after the human delegation, and the runners came back alone, and they looked shaken in a way clerks are not supposed to look. I was near the door when they returned. I heard what they told the Arbiter's aide, low and fast. The humans had not run. They had not hidden. They had simply kept walking to their ship, the small woman in front, the soldier behind, and when the runners called out formal phrasing, the conquered requests your return, deeply formal, the kind of phrasing that is an order wearing the clothes of a request, Essie Boteng had stopped, turned, and said one thing. She had said, "Tell the Arbiter we'll be in our ship. If he wants to talk to us as equals, he can ask. If he wants to talk to us as a client, we're already gone." And then she had boarded, and the human ship had sealed, and it sat there at the dock, lit and quiet, not leaving, just waiting. That somehow was worse than if they had fled. A fleeing thing you can chase. A fleeing thing is still afraid of you. But a thing that walks away calmly and then sits down within arm's reach and waits, that thing is not afraid of you at all. That thing is waiting for you to be afraid. The runner finished. The aide went to tell Sorendrak. I watched the High Arbiter's plates as he heard it. I had 4 cycles of reading Dranik. I knew that posture. It was the posture of a creature that has just been told the wall it leaned on is not load-bearing. The hall did not adjourn. That was its own small tragedy looking back. A wiser body would have closed the session, sent everyone away, taken a breath. But the great species could not stand to leave the room, because leaving the room meant admitting the session had ended on her terms, with her words hanging in the air. So they stayed. 60 Dranik, a tower of Iland, the Kaven, the AI. They stayed and they argued. And oh, how they argued. The Kaven spoke first because the Kaven always smell opportunity before anyone else smells danger. Their senior trader rose, the one whose sheen had gone dull, and he did not waste words. "She had something," he said. "You all heard it. A third path, we found it. A doomed species does not refuse shelter. A doomed species does not cross the galaxy to insult the room and walk out. She is not doomed." Which means we are missing information. And missing information, in my experience, is the most expensive thing there is. The Dranik ring rumbled at him. One of the younger arbiters, Veskdrak, ambitious, eager to be seen, stood and said the thing the proud always say. "It is a bluff, a small people's bluff. They have nothing. They are frightened and clever, and they have nothing. And when the seer reaches their colonies, they will come crawling back, and we will not be so generous a second time." "And if it is not a bluff," said the Kaven. "It is a bluff." "You keep saying that," said the Kaven, "the way a man keeps saying it is not raining while the water rises past his knees." The AI clicked. The translators rendered it haltingly, because AI does not map well onto our tongues. What it came out as was, they were not the posture of liars. We watched the small ones. There is a posture liars take and a posture the certain take. They took the second. We have been alive a long time. We know the difference. And that landed. The AI did not speak often, and when they did, the room listened, because the AI had been old when the Dranik were young. Sarandrak had said nothing this whole time. He sat now. He had finally sat. The great flared height collapsed back down into something almost ordinary, and he stared at the closed doors, and I think he was doing the hardest thing a powerful creature can do, which is to take an enemy's words seriously after deciding they were beneath him. You'll only understand what it is after we've walked out that door, and then it'll be too late to ask us nicely. He turned to his aide. "Tassamet," he said. The aide blinked. "High Arbiter." "The human reach colony, Tassamet. The seer reached it 8 cycles ago. We wrote it off." He paused. "Did we confirm the loss?" The aide consulted the Illand. There was a flurry. Ledgers, queries, the dry rattle of bureaucrats searching their own records for something they had never thought to look at. The answer came back, and the clerk who delivered it did so very quietly, as though saying it softly might make it less true. No, they had not confirmed the loss of Tassamet. The system had gone silent, as all touch systems went silent, and silence had been recorded as loss, as it always was, because in 40 cycles silence had only ever meant one thing. They had never checked. Why would you check a grave? The message arrived 91 minutes after the doors closed. I remember the number because the Illand logged it, and the number became, afterward, a kind of scar in the records. 91 minutes. The length of the galaxy's last comfortable afternoon. It did not come to the conquered. That was the first insult, though no one understood it as an insult until later. It came on the open band, the public band, the one any ship or station or world could receive, the band you used for weather and shipping lanes and nothing important. Humanity broadcast it to everyone. The conquered received it the same way a fruit vendor on some backwater moon received it, as one listener among millions. It was a recording. I was in the hall when they played it on the great dome display, because by then no one could pretend the session was about anything else. The whole chamber went dark and the stars overhead were replaced by an image, and the image was a system. Tassamet. I had expected gray. We had all expected gray. 40 cycles had taught us what a seer-touched system looked like. The dead light, the cold drift of broken hulls, the patient machines moving through the wreckage of whatever had lived there. That is what the dome should have shown. The grave of a small human colony, 8 cycles cold. That is not what it showed. It showed Tassamet alive. Lit worlds, working stations, shipping lanes thick with traffic, a defense grid I did not recognize, vast and strange, threaded through the whole system like a net of cold blue light, and drifting through that net, dark and broken and still, were the wrecks. Seer wrecks. Hundreds of them. I had never seen a seer wreck. No one had. In 40 cycles of war, the conquered had never once destroyed enough of the gray tide in one place to leave a field of dead machines drifting in the dark. We did not make seer wrecks. We made retreats. We made silent systems. We made graves with our own names on them. And here was a human colony, a small human colony, written off, abandoned, seated in a treaty no one had signed, and it was floating in a sea of dead seer, and it was fine. The recording panned, slow, deliberate, almost gentle. It wanted you to see everything. It wanted you to count. And then a voice came over it, the old man with the ink-stained hands. I knew his voice by then. He spoke plainly, the way she spoke plainly, and the translators rendered him into 40 tongues at once across the whole listening galaxy. "This is the Tassamet system," he said. 8 cycles ago the seer came here. You all know what that means. You've watched it happen 40 times. The system goes quiet and you record it as lost, and you move your fleets back and you tell your peoples it was a strategic decision. We didn't move back. We didn't have anywhere to move back to. So we stayed and we worked the problem, and 8 cycles ago we found the answer. We are not going to tell you what the answer is." A pause just long enough. We offered it to you, that's what the talks were. We didn't come to your station to be integrated. We came to give you the thing that ends the war and to ask in return to be treated as equals, not protected, not allocated, not spent. Equals. That was the whole price. It was a very low price. It was, honestly, a gift. You put us in the lowest chair in the room and told us to sign away our ships and our worlds and our children, for our own good, in exchange for the protection of a conquered that has not defended a single system in 40 cycles. So we left. The offer's withdrawn. We'll defend our own space. We'll hold our own line. The seer stops at human borders now, and it will keep stopping there, and the rest of the galaxy can keep doing what it's been doing, which is losing. You had one chance to make humanity your partner. You spent it telling us how small we were. Good luck out there. The recording ended. The stars came back into the dome. And the Hall of Concord, the most powerful room in the galaxy, 60 Dranic, a tower of Iland, the Kavan, the Ai, every great species ringed in their robes and their armor, sat in a silence so complete I could hear the air recyclers struggling, as they always did, to keep up. I will tell you the exact moment the regret arrived, because regret is a thing with a shape, and I saw it take shape. It was not when the recording showed the living system. The proud can explain away one impossible thing, a trick, a staged image, old footage. The Dranic muttered all of this in the first seconds. It was when the recording showed the wrecks, and the Kavan who calculate, who cannot help calculating, began, very quietly, to count them. I heard the senior trader counting under his breath. I heard him reach a number and stop. I heard him say, to no one, in a voice gone thin, "That's more seer hulls in one system than the conquered has destroyed in the entire war." That was the moment. That was when 60 Dranic understood, all at once, in the same heartbeat, what the small woman in the plain coat had carried into their room and offered them at the lowest possible price, and what they had driven out the door for the pleasure of feeling tall. Sarandrak made the sound again, the low one, the proud thing sound, but this time there was no fury under it. There was only the other thing, the new fear, gone fully grown now, no longer new. He stood, slowly. The plates did not flare. There was no one left to intimidate. He looked at the closed doors of his own hall, and he said to his aide, in a voice I had to lean close to hear, "Open a channel to the human ship." The aide hesitated. On what authority? What is the message? And the high arbiter of the conquered, who had never in his long life been told no by anything that survived saying it, who 91 minutes earlier had thrown his shadow across a small woman and told her sign or burn, the high arbiter said, "Tell them the conquered requests to speak with humanity, as equals." The aide stared at him. "Say please," Sarandrak said. "Make sure you say please." They said please. The human ship took the channel. It did not have to. It had everything now, and the conquered had nothing, and there is no rule in the universe that says the winner must answer the loser's call. But it took the channel, and Essie Boateng's face appeared on the great dome where the stars had been, and she looked exactly as she had in the room. Plain coat, patient, unhurried. She listened to the conquered's request. She did not gloat. I want that on the record, because afterward people told the story as though she crowed, as though she rubbed their faces in it, and she did not. She listened, and when Sarandrak had finished, and it cost him, every word, you could see it cost him, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Why now?" "You know why," he said. "I'd like to hear you say it." And he said it. The proudest creature I ever served, in front of his 60 and his tower of clerks and the listening galaxy, said it out loud. "Because you can stop them," he said, "and we cannot. Because we were wrong about what you were, and we have spent 40 cycles being wrong about it, and 90 minutes ago we were wrong about it to your face. Because every system we lose from this day forward, we will lose knowing we drove the answer out our own door." He paused. The plate sagged. "Because we are afraid," he said. Is that what you wanted? We are afraid and you are not, and that is the whole shape of it. Now, will you talk to us, as equals?" She let the silence go long. One last time. She let him feel the seconds, the way he had made her feel the seconds at the doors, all those minutes and that whole lifetime ago. Then she said, "Yes." And I felt the hall let go of a breath it had been holding for 91 minutes. "But not here," she said. "Not in a room you built to make other people feel small. We'll meet on Tessamet. You can see the system for yourselves. You can count the wrecks in person. And there'll be one chair and it'll be the same height as every other chair, and the first species that tries to put someone in a lower seat can leave and not come back. Those are the terms. They're not negotiable. They're not even high. They're just equal. Can the conquered do equal, high arbiter? You've never tried it. I'm honestly not sure you know how." Sorendrak was quiet a long moment. "We will learn," he said. "I hope so," she said, "for everyone's sake. There's a tide coming, and it doesn't care how old your species is, or how tall your delegation is, or how low the chair is that you put the small people in. It just keeps coming. We found a way to make it stop. We're willing to share it, but not with people who think we owe them the sharing. With partners. That's the door. It's open. Walk through it like equals, or don't walk through it at all." The channel closed. The stars came back. And the war, the 40-cycle war, the unwinnable war, the war that had eaten worlds and pride and hope in equal measure. The war turned in that room on that day, because a small woman in a plain coat had been willing to walk out of a door, and because the most powerful beings in the galaxy had been too proud, for 91 minutes, to imagine that she could. I left the spindle not long after. The talks moved to Tessamet, as she said. I was not invited. A junior Seleth interpreter is not invited to the meetings that remake the galaxy, but I heard how they went. The conquered learned equal. Slowly, badly, with much grinding of pride, the way the doors grind shut, the way old stone learns a new shape. But they learned. They had to. The tide does not care about your dignity, and it turns out, when the choice is finally and truly learn or burn, even the Dranic can learn. The gray tide stopped. Not all at once. But it stopped, system by system, world by world, as the human answer spread, whatever it was. I still do not know, almost no one does, that was always part of the price. And the galaxy that came after was not the galaxy I grew up small in. It was a galaxy where the size of your people was not the measure of your seat, where a delegation of 4 could be worth more than a delegation of 60. Where the smallest chair in the room was not anymore a place you put someone to remind them of their place. I kept the chair, the observer chair, the low one, the one they gave her. I took it when no one was looking, and I have it still in my small home on my small world, and sometimes I sit in it, and I am Seleth, and we are a small people, in size and in number, and I think about her standing up in it. People ask me when they learn I was there what the lesson is. They want a tidy thing, a line they can carry. I always tell them the same thing. The conquered thought power was a height you stood at. That is why they built a tall room and gave the small people a low chair. They thought if they could only make you look up at them, they had already won. But power was never the height of the chair. Power was being the one who could get up out of it and walk away, and have the whole galaxy realize, too late, with the doors already grinding shut, that you were the only one in the room who could afford to. They put her in the smallest seat in the galaxy. She stood up in it, and she made the whole galaxy small.